welcome to the Psychiatry and Psychotherapy podcast. I'm here to talk about getting rid of burnout, increasing job satisfaction, and feeling like an expert in what you do. One thing that created a lot of burnout and angst for me was trying to get continued medical education right at the last minute. So why not join the CME membership and do CME while listening to this podcast? Go to psychiatrypodcast.com, sign up, sign in, take the test, and the certification is emailed to you in seconds.
Before we start the show, Dr. Pewter would like to announce that none of the participants in this episode have any conflicts of interest. Let's get to it.
All right, welcome back to the podcast. I am joined today by a group of residents. We are going to be talking about a book called Neurosis and Human Growth by Karen Horney, The Struggle Towards Self-Realization. This is a book which I read as a third-year psychiatry resident, and it was awesome. I felt like it was like my first taste of like really deep inner psychic stuff going on. And I was all about it. I think I read it again somewhere in my early sort of practice. And then I read it again for this. So joined with me is Serena Weber. She's been on several episodes. Hassan Kanani. He's also been on some episodes. George
Giannakakos.
Okay.
All right, in the ballpark.
And Sonia De La Cruz, who's new to the podcast. So
yeah.
I'm sad that some of you are graduating. This is a local Orlando residency, and we're going to be missing you guys. Oh.
We'll zoom in. Catch
Okay.
up occasionally.
That sounds good. So George, why did Karen Horney break from other psychoanalytic schools?
So we're just jumping right in.
What was the unique about her thoughts?
So I think, Horney, like obviously a lot of her theories stem from Freudian like psychoanalytics. And one of the biggest things that I think she had issue with, at least with in terms of how Freud in particular defined neurosis, was how he kind of brought everything back to that the psychosocial? No,
like the drives, the early drives, the Oedipal drives.
Right, like the libidinal
drives.
Right,
yeah.
And she was like, I don't know. I think you're really kind of narrowing things down to something that is not necessarily something that she observed in a lot of her work with her patients. She felt that Freud kind of failed to address a lot of moral and cultural pressures and how those things affected how patients responded in their psychological development. She also felt like the whole penis envy thing, all that, like the Oedipal stuff that you were mentioning, really boxed patients in, particularly women, in areas that I felt like she didn't see as appropriate.
Yeah, as we'd all kind of...
Right. Yeah.
Like, usually the things that we think about Freud are the sort of the caricature things, which have not lasted. Everything else we've absorbed, right? So we've absorbed transference, we've absorbed like Freudian slips, early object relations theory, like a lot of this stuff, the dream analysis, like the unconscious, a lot of the stuff that he put together was absorbed or kind of like odd, and the oddities are usually what you read in textbooks, right? So she actually trained with Franz Alexander at his institute. This book was published in 1950s, and actually Dr. Tarr, my mentor, came out to USC to train under Dr. Franz Alexander as well. And so he's my mentor. I think is in his late 90s now, and he's still traveling to Europe like 3 times a year. Yeah,
because they founded the Chicago Psychoanalytic Institute together. Was it Franz Alexander and?
I don't know like if she was a founding member, but I know she went out there for a while, and then she eventually broke off and did her own thing.
Yeah, Chicago's good, by the way, but
that's where you're at, right?
Yeah, she was like, yeah.
But this was so this book was published in 1950, right? And so she was psychoanalytically trained. She would see people pretty intensively. So what were her unique thoughts? That was like the second part of the question. Anyone else have any thoughts on what was unique about her? A lot was unique about her. Maybe I should paint just like the big picture so that it's like we can add to the big picture, right? But I'll put it in a way that I feel like is understandable. Okay, so you have this kid early on who basically like is not seen for who he is, or it's kind of like the true self is stifled. Maybe there's some trauma, maybe there's some different things where he needs to protect it. And so he, through imagination, identifies kind of like this idealized persona, the hero, the fearless, the conqueror, right? Or it could be the perfect, the person who is always, winning, the person who's always perfect. So imagine this idealized persona as like there's like a cape behind it, right? So he makes this move from the true self to this idealized self. And then what happens is, what causes this idealized self is a lot of like environmental influences, right? And so as you're reading this book, if you go back and read it, you're reading it with like, there were environmental influences, right, in the 30s, 1930s, 1920s that influenced Karen Horney and her generation, right? That may be different than what's influenced us, right? So we may have different social pressures and environmental influences on what we would then define as the shoulds, right? So the shoulds are like, I should be perfect, or I should always be politically correct, or I always should have the right thing to say, blah, 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 right? But these shoulds are a little bit different than like good moral, like things that we would all agree upon, because the shoulds have like this very, very strong link to the idealized persona. And so you have this idealized persona, imagine the cape, and there's these things like neurotic ambition, striving for perfection, and vindictive triumph, okay? And so you have initially, like this real person who's got things that they were built to do, things that desires, emotions, personhood, that then gets shifted into this like false self, right? This idealized self. And it's the anxiety, it's often the anxiety, like I feel alone and isolated in a very scary world, right? That's the anxiety that drives this process. And then out of this idealized persona, you have the shoulds, you have the neurotic ambition. So it's ambition, not in a sense like, oh, I want to accomplish something that's close to my heart, close to my goals, close to my personhood. It's like, I want to win at everything. It's like the person who can't lose at a board game that he's never even played. And, or maybe it's like they play a new sport and it's like, I should be perfect at this sport. I should be good at this sport without really, really trying hard for decades. And I should be able to beat him. And then so it's this striving that's in all domains, not the gifted places in your life where you're like, this is uniquely my talent that I enjoy, that gives me a sense of passion and purpose. This is different. This is a competitiveness for the sake of competitiveness. That's this neurotic ambition. Then there's the striving for perfection. So it's like, I need to be perfect. My house needs to be perfect. Like, I need to be perceived as perfect. And the perfection is defined by the culture, okay? So the culture creates the shoulds and your subculture too. So you could be in like a subculture and you could start to notice what the shoulds are, what the things are. I mean, there's probably some in psychiatry, right? There probably
I was
some.
say like medicine, the subculture of medicine.
There's probably
full
some.
of shoulds.
Medicine enculturates you, and psychiatry then like tries to reinculturate you, and then I'm trying to get you to enjoy and love what you're doing, right? And be passionate.
You should love it.
You should be passionate. You should just find your.
Good.
That's good. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's hard. It's hard to escape it, right? It's very, very hard to escape it. Which is why I try to lead with like, hey, I'm not perfect. Like I'm in process here. I think we all suffer anxieties and worries and, different things. It's like, I talk to a lot of residents and nurse practitioners and PAs and, it's like the same things. Everyone's struggling with the same things. Insecurities, like what do I do with this difficult person? How am I going to be perceived by my colleagues? Interpersonal conflicts. My boss doesn't understand and just makes me more busy. So, okay.
Sorry, can we talk a little bit about like how neurosis is being defined in this book versus maybe how like a layperson might define like, oh, my mom is a neurotic, and like what we mean by that versus what like the author might mean 50 years ago or 70 years ago.
So this process of living out of the idealized persona and not out of your true self is what it means to be neurotic, according to Karen Horney. Now, I had my wife started reading this book, and she calls me up all worried. She's like, but you've told me that I score high on neuroticism, and like, I mean, a little bit higher than the average, on like the big five. And I'm like, okay, the big five neuroticism, very different than this. Okay. Could be some overlap, but like, it's a different measure. They created the big five out of like all of the adjectives that existed to describe people, and they narrowed it down into clusters and looked at factor analysis. Like, that's not a psychoanalytic tradition based measure. Okay. But then neurotic, according to psychoanalysis, there's 3 levels, like neurotic, borderline, not borderline personality disorder,
Borderline like organizational.
Borderline organization, and psychotic organization. And so that's not what this is talking about either. Okay. So she's like recrafting pretty much psychoanalysis from the ground up. So I hope that didn't confuse too many of you. Okay, let me finish this like big picture portrait of what's going on, and then we'll dive into the facets of it. Okay, so you have this person, they have their shoulds, they're defending these shoulds now. Okay, and so now what happens is they live their life, and people point out the discrepancy between who they really are, meaning the experience other people are having of you, and this idealized persona that you are so fervently trying to defend that you are. And that discrepancy makes you react in 3 ways, or makes the person who's neurotic, according to Karen Horney, react in 3 ways. One is to attack, and to, and we're not talking about like a little attack, we're talking about a big attack. And then the second is to join. So you join the aggressor, join the person and take on their shoulds. Oh, I should be doing this. Oh, I'll change my shoulds, right? Which is another, like it may appease your sort of psychological process for a little bit, but it still is suffocating, right? And then the third is to just isolate and run away, and just, by the time you're in your late 60s, you're like no friends, living in the middle of nowhere, like very little human contact, right? So it just pushes these people out further and further into the abyss of sorts. So they retreat. So that's what happens when someone pushes against you and shows the discrepancy between your real self, who you really are, and this persona that you're trying to portray to the world. Okay. That's the basic thing. The one thing I forgot was, so I mentioned they have neurotic ambition, striving for perfection, but I did not mention vindictive triumph. Okay. And so this is like when they beat you, it's like right-sided smile, gloating in a really kind of a negative way. It leaks out a lot. Most high social EQ people hide this probably pretty well, but it's there. So it's like, I'm going to steal your partner, and then I'm going to like rub it in a way maybe that just like defeats you. Or like, I'm going to beat you at this like game of Settlers of Catan. And then I'm going to like, basically just gloat, and maybe internally, but maybe it comes out externally, but it's like there's a vindictiveness aspect of it, right? Okay. So how's that? Good.
No, it's good. So I'm the outlier here in that I didn't
Serena
read the
Weber.
book.
I told her to
yeah.
come. She was busy. I told her to come. And so I've asked Serena, be the voice of the listener who doesn't really know this. And so she's going to ask questions when she gets confused. Go ahead.
What you said though reminds me a little bit, and I don't know if this is accurate, but it sounds like a lot of narcissism potentially, like the idea of like the false self or idealized self and the true self, and then I guess it reminds me of like Winnicott and like
Yep.
Cohen.
Yep. Yeah. So there's
like injury.
Yeah, no, that's like what you described to me sounds like narcissism.
And I'm glad you brought that up. So I've never done an episode on narcissism, so this could be considered like my sort of like first episode where we're touching on a lot of things that are narcissistic. One thing that she brings up is that there's also that when there's this knowledge of the discrepancy, there's self-hatred that comes in, which you'll sometimes see when you get the narcissist in your office for a prolonged period of time. It's like at first they're very sort of like everything is awesome. It's really hard to connect with them because you don't feel like they're congruent. Congruent meaning they're not really talking about their real emotions. They're distant. So people who are very neurotic in the way that Karen Horney defines it. By the way, for the rest of this time, I'm just going to use that word and we're just going to know Karen Horney. We're talking about Karen Horney's book here. Okay. So in the way that people are neurotic, they're not living up to their shoulds at times, or they're in denial that they're not. But when they catch themselves, then there's that self-hatred. So it's a little bit different maybe than a psychopathic narcissist who just has no affective empathy. I think they can be more of the pure Machiavellian dark triad, narcissist, psychopath, Machiavellian, and they might see everyone else as like objects, like cockroaches. Everyone's a cockroach, so they're in their brains. That's how they're wired, right? That may be a little bit different than what we're talking about here with Karen Horney. But the narcissist that you could consider that would fall into this category would be someone who gets deeply angry whenever they get challenged. And they lash out and they like call people names, they degrade people, they attack. Right, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I think at one point, I can't remember where in the book, they do talk about like a narcissistic person or personality. Someone has really married that idealized self with the actual self so that they truly see themselves as that godlike person. And so then the challenge comes in and they say, well, that's impossible because my actualized self is my idealized self. And then all of the fallout that you just kind of described.
Right. So it's like, the more of the grandiose type of neurotic. She also describes a self-effacing neurotic, which is like very sort of internally punitive. And that may sort of come in more like a depressed person.
Yeah, when I think of self-effacing, I'm thinking about somebody who like will lose at a game but make you feel guilty to the point where they regret losing and they like get, that vindictive triumph by sucking you in and making you regret that you won. And then I know when we're talking about the narcissism, we have the self-effacing type, and then we also have the expansive type where they're trying to get that mastery, and that's where they're getting that sense of pride, and that kind of has that flavor of narcissism. And I know she talks about these 3 different types of personalities, and one of them where she's talking about narcissism, but she makes sure to make that distinction between the narcissism that we know and what she's describing.
Type that they mention in the book.
Yeah.
Okay, define what you remember of that type.
So what I remember is they kind of shun like the idealized self, and then they kind of have a sense of shame with it, but then they're not living a vital life. Like they're not going after their ideals or living out their true self. They've just kind of retreated, kind of a shell.
Yeah.
I had a couple patients in like psychodynamic therapy who, for cultural reasons and family reasons, like they were like homosexual men and they felt like they could not live that way openly. And so they kind of made themselves, or basically doing this false self. And maybe it's not the same thing because I wouldn't necessarily call it narcissism, and that's in that case. But when you were talking about how like there was moral pressures that created ideal self. Well, an ideal self maybe, as they see it, includes being heterosexual, and then they live like a really false self in a different way. I don't know if she touches on anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that totally, I think it still fits into her framework because the idealized self, I think can be anything like you were describing with those patients that you had. And so just because they're not exhibiting how we would define narcissism today, I mean, I think to a certain extent it is what you were describing. I think it does still fit. That gap between right the idealized self and the actual self, whatever that may be.
But it just sounds, I guess what sounds different is because we ended up talking about narcissism a lot, and that sounds different, right? Because I don't know if
this isn't always narcissism, and honestly, I think if you're listening to this and you're like, I probably have some of that too. It's like, we probably maybe not full blown in the way that if you read the book, you'll be like, oh, okay, it's a little bit different. But we all have a persona that we present to the world, which is probably different than our real self. And especially if you went through medical school, like you learn how to like be a certain way to get less pain, right? Because like it's like you can't show signs of weakness a lot of times. You can't say you're hungry. So there's you can't have emotion. Like, I don't want to stay till 12 o'clock and keep operating. It's like too bad. Like you're, you have to just kind of like play the role and roll with whatever's happening. And then all the chaos of like you may not have a lot of choices. Right. So I feel like that's a little bit different than the neurosis that she's talking about, but it could be kind of like, as you're listening to this, I'm imagining that you could be thinking like, oh, I have a list of shoulds that I believe, or I have this persona that I'm aspiring to be. Good.
No, I'm just thinking about how we've basically like introduced the topic and kind of given an overview. And initially it definitely seems a little bit more confusing. And there's like so many other concepts that we already know. And comparing that to this can actually seem not difficult, but confusing to when you're trying to understand it. And that's why when she wrote the book, most of the book is actually talking about the whole pathology or the whole concept of neurosis. And that last chapter is then talking about like the therapy aspect of it. And she talks about why she spends all of that and why she goes like piece by piece or element by element, starting from the root of how neurosis is developed, and then working her way to introducing us to each of these parts of the idealized self. And so for me, most of the time spent while reading the book was maybe those first 5-6 chapters, just because it was so dense and each concept is new, foreign, and you're mixing it compared to like what you know. And so you have to like build this new schema in order to build on that. And so if it's okay with you, I know we've already talked about neurosis, or like briefly talked about it, but I really liked how she started off the book with like the acorn example about how like an acorn doesn't become a tree itself, but the acorn actually has to be, you just have to provide a safe environment, a supportive environment. It needs the good soil, it needs the sun, needs the water. And when the acorn feels safe, then it grows up into a tree. And so really that's how it is in an ideal situation where a person or a child, if they have that safe environment and they feel that love, unconditional love, then they're able to identify with the real self and have that healthy growth. But the whole problem happens that parents or the people that they're around or the environment that they're around, they're struggling with their own the neurosis. And so they're not able to provide that safe environment, the environment of warmth and compassion that the child needs. And the child eventually learns that they're not safe. And so since they're not safe, they go into like a warrior mode. Or this is how I see it in my mind, that they see it in a warrior mode. And so they're not worried about getting that love as much, and they're more worried about protecting themselves in order to be able to grow. And so that's where this destructive energy of neurosis comes in.
So I would just put some nuance to the last thing you said. The energy that would lead them to grow into their true self gets diverted to then the neurotic goals. And so what you're doing in therapy is you're helping them move from spending all of this energy towards their neurotic goals back towards like their true self, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I mean, how do you do this, right? It's like you are looking for glimpses of their real personhood. This is where I think like logotherapy is so helpful. It's like what, or microexpression. It's like microexpression cuts to the core of like that emotion is your emotion. Like that anger that you flashed is a real emotion that you just had. Okay, I know that. Now what do I do with that as a therapist? Well, let's say the person is denying that they're ever angry, right? Like I should always be happy. I should never be angry. It's like, okay, then how do we help them get less shame around being angry? How do we help them being safer, right? With being angry. And so a lot of what I would do then is I would empathize with the distress of being angry, or empathize with the shame that's contained in the anger, or, try to allow for the person to have transferential anger towards me, which will come out in a way that they would be safe enough to then start to get in touch with their real personhood. So it's like the energy. One thing that Karen Horney says that I like is that everyone has an energy to move forward, right? But the problem is that often this energy is diverted into the goals of the neurotic ambition, and people don't know how to get it back on track. What are you thinking? Yeah.
No,
You follow?
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I follow that. And that's why, like, when she starts off talking about it, she calls it a waste of energy. Or
It's a lot of the neurotic ambition can be a waste of energy. There are things that we uniquely enjoy that gives us a sense of pleasure and purpose. For me, like, connecting with other human beings. It's like, that's like, I really enjoy that. So it's like, I feel very privileged to be in a job where I get to do that. Or just even with you guys, we're like looking at each other like, I enjoy teaching, right? And so it's like, how do you find what is your true passion? Well, honestly, it's probably been years of therapy, I don't know how you do it without doing your own, having someone who's trained and helping you sort of uncover, what might be under it deeper. And when she mentions at one part, like dreams give her like a glimpse into this world as well. And I really do think that, like looking at dreams and like it can uncover unconscious fears. I had this one patient that would have dreams of water crashing over her. And it was like in the world that she felt like overwhelmed, like, and suffocated. And then eventually I appeared in the dreams as like a guard against the water. Like I created a bubble of like air around her. And in my mind, that was the bubble for her to allow herself to find her true self. And then, it's progressed to this
Safe holding environment.
and I've with this
Airbending.
particular person, and I imagine this person might listen to this, so it's like, change a couple details, right? But this person has found their creative outlet, and the world has noticed, and it's like as this person has become like someone who is doing this creative outlet, it's like there are people that are flocking to it, like it's that close to this person's like persona, but it's taken time to like protect that part, right? That would have otherwise been like suffocated by the waves.
you know what I'm thinking about? I'm thinking about how like she starts off talking about search for glory, and how like the complete opposite is that the search for meaning. And how we talked about the search for meaning with logotherapy and with Viktor Frankl, but
that's
we
exactly
talk about
right.
search for glory and all of this the entire time, and I'm like, oh, what is it on the opposite? And it's right there as
Search for meaning, and it will be very idiosyncratic to yourself, probably, right? And and it may take a while to find it, right? Yeah. this is where, like, I think in therapy, it's like we don't just empathize with the sadness and the anger and the negative emotions. You empathize with the good stuff too, like the positive emotions, like when someone lights up, when someone accomplishes something, an achievement, like graduating from residency, you get excited with them, you know? You share in that. And sometimes I'll see this with, like, when I watch videos of residents, the only attuned to the negative. And it's like, that's what I should do as a resident. I should empathize. You should empathize with everything. No. You should, or at least you should, like, it's hard to get away from the shoulds, but it's just as important to connect with the positive.
It is. Yeah.
Wait, I like relate to this so much. Well, and I don't know if maybe everyone can relate to this a little bit, but I do feel like in medical school, I was driven by the shoulds, like, a lot. And then I think more recently, I feel like life is easier and more enjoyable and less stressful just because I'm thinking more in the just what I choose to do.
Right. Yeah.
And Hassan knows, because we share an office sometimes. Sometimes he'll catch me saying, like, oh, I should have done this, or I need to do this, I should do this. And he'll be like, you say too many shoulds. And I know that's.
Yeah,
It takes one to know one, though.
Yeah. And I think we talk about this too in medical training, or we hear a lot of, like, imposter syndrome, but, like, who's the imposter? Like what are you supposed to? How are you supposed to be, right? And so the imposter is, like, the actual self filling the role of this, omniscient, omnipotent doctor, and you're like, well, I'm an imposter because I'm not that person. When in reality, like, who is that person? Right?
Dr. Cummings, otherwise it doesn't exist, right? I'm not that person. But, like, it's, and this is, like, another thing is a lot of patients come wanting this answer. Like, if only I got this answer, I would be cured. Mm-hmm. And it's like, for me, it's like, it's not an answer. It's like, it's going to come out of relationship, and it's going to take a while to uncover it. Sometimes it comes quickly, but usually it takes a while, right? And it's like a good, like, meaningful thing to dedicate yourself to.
Sonia, what year are you?
Journey. I'm a second year.
Second year. How's your journey going?
Honestly, my journey in residency has been wonderful. Like,
well, that's good.
Genuinely. I kind of, relate to kind of what you guys were saying, where I feel like in medical school, you're just so drowned and swamped by, like, needing to meet these grades and, like, having to impress these people and kind of molding yourself into the perfect applicant for that residency track. And it's compounded by your environment too. You talked to Hassan about, like, the environment in which you're in. And when you see kind of everyone around you in that atmosphere, and, like, that's also reinforced, becomes a really difficult current to go against. So I think it's also important to have an environment where you are given the freedom to be you and to have that support, and in putting in necessary ingredients to let that person flourish and be genuine.
And it's hard because there are so many hoops to jump through. When I meet with medical students, I say to them, sometimes you're going to do a project you don't want to do if you're working with me, because we need to get it done. Sometimes you're going to do a project because we've sat down and we've talked about, like, what your passion is, and your passion, I can imagine some topic that's close enough to your passion that, like, we can kind of, like, get you to do something closer to what you're really interested in. But sometimes, you just gotta be a part of a team. And the other thing is, like, sometimes when you're learning the craft of, like, how do I review papers or how do I do research, it's like there may be a topic in your mind that you eventually want to get to, but when you're learning the craft, you're learning the craft. Like, you can't just jump in and do research if you've never done research. It's easier to be mentored. In an upcoming episode, I'm going to go through a paper I published, and I had a great mentor and a series of great mentors. But it's like, I couldn't have done that without great mentorship. It's like, so you have to be a part of a team and sometimes do something that's, like, a little bit less interesting to you per se, but maybe you can eventually more closely approximate what your passion or unique curiosity is, if that makes sense.
Yeah, she says a growth with others, it comes in love and in friction. So there's love, there's a safe environment, but there's also friction.
Or like, would you know that you liked psychiatry if you hadn't gone through internal medicine and surgery and ER and OBGYN, and then you're like, oh, what I really enjoy is this. So sometimes you have to like try out 100 different things, to know that you don't want to do those things. But there's something about this that really like gets you excited.
Yeah, or you're out there coming out of the womb wanting to be a psychiatrist. That's okay too.
Yeah.
And I think she talks about it in the book too, where we are able to kind of have delayed gratification because we have these values that we hold so dear that it's okay to kind of forego like immediate desires in pursuit of that thing that you value that gives you meaning and vitality in life.
I have questions, but I don't know if we should like dive back into them, or this is a good line of thinking as well. Any thoughts? Was there things? Maybe let's go.
I know we talked about the shoulds, and I want to talk about the consequence of the should. Not like in the long term, or just in the moment when you're in the shoulds.
Okay.
They're exhausting. They're exhausting.
So exhausting.
It takes such a toll. And we were talking about it, and I could probably think about my own exhaustions, but I know she talked about hers, like how I remember, what was it? I think she was like on a journey from Mexico back to the States or something, and she had a flight, but then she was taken off the flight because I guess some priorities, and she had to take a bus from what was it? Somewhere in Texas, Corpus Christi, all the way up to New York, and it was a 3-day bus ride, and she was so frustrated. She was like, because it's a resistance that you're feeling, right? And so she was so frustrated that this happened to her. Like, of course, it makes sense logically for you to get booted off a flight and this to happen to anybody else, but why did it happen to me? It's like that sense of entitlement that brings about the frustration. And the insightful that she was able to recognize in the moment that she's getting frustrated, and she shares how she recognized it, and that frustration, that exhaustion, the fatigue that happened, it just went away. And not just that, she enjoyed the trip, the 3-day trip all the way back to New York. And so I definitely relate with that. In my own life, like, shoulds come all the time, and in relationships and stuff, it's like, no, I should do this, or like that perfectionist mentality comes in, and sometimes I don't, that should brings that resistance, the energy of resistance, and so sometimes instead of saying should, it could be I want, and so changing that mentality takes away that resistance and really makes life easier.
Okay, yeah, because I think there are shoulds that are like good shoulds, and then there are shoulds that are the neurotic shoulds. And she defines the neurotic shoulds as like they always come with this weight and this punitiveness when they're not met, right? There's general things like I should do these things. They're good things to do. I don't necessarily feel like the this sort of like self-hatred that quickly comes when I don't do them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the shoulds associated with the idealized self. Like
I should work out. Like if I miss a workout, okay, like I'm going to be okay, right? Whereas like someone who maybe is more neurotically focused around working out, it's like now the rest of my day is completely destroyed. I'm like, and then they beat themselves up like I'm a coward. I'm lazy. I'm a procrastinator. And then that self-hatred then turns into like, well, maybe I should drink, or maybe I should do something, to hurt myself now because like I've been bad. So it's like, now I'm going to do something that hurts me. And so you could kind of see how there's a difference between like, in general, like, we can benefit from eating a certain way or exercise in a certain way, but then like, it could become a neurotic drive in a way that's unhealthy as well.
Yeah. I mean, I still think there's value, like in your example, I still think there's value in exploring why should you exercise, right? Like, I think, and then it may go down a path where it's like, well, because I want to obtain the certain physique because that is the cultural expectation of what manhood is, or what manly, masculinity is, and I want to achieve that standard, right? So it could be, superficially, what you described, right? And he might not spiral down into that death spiral that you described, but I think it's still, as therapists, our job to kind of explore. You said you should work out. Why? And then see what they say.
Right, and this is exactly why it's such a loaded thing to prescribe it for depression or anxiety, because people are coming in with all sorts of ideas about why they were exercised in the past or what it meant to them, or when someone recommended exercise, are they recommending it because of they're not pleased with my aesthetics, or it's like in my mind it's a potential dynamite field that I kind of have to tiptoe around. Okay, hey, there's this thing that's almost like a medication that you could do.
Better than a medication. No side effects except for some soreness. Right?
Yeah, good. I've converted you fully. No, and I've started to run a little bit too. You'd be proud.
Good. People in our program actually ran a 5K this morning.
Oh,
and
nice.
I like to think that I started that.
Good for you.
We're running now.
That positive culture is all too.
Shouldn't you have run that, Serena?
I chose not to.
Okay.
Oh, good. So you had the freedom not to. That's excellent. We can embrace that freedom. I'll take my kids running, and it's I'll let the slower of the two lead. The faster one goes in the middle. I go in the caboose, right? And so we try to run one house, walk one house, and slowly, over weeks, they're making me hustle. I'm running faster than I would if I wasn't running with them. So it's been fun. But it's trying to create it in a fun way where it's at that age, it's how do you make it into a Pokemon game or something like that, where it's they're anyways. Okay. So we got Sonia. Tell me, how do you think Karen Horney would describe someone who was healthy?
So I think Karen Horney would describe someone as healthy if they develop the unique alive forces of their real self. So that means tapping into their goals, their desires, their gifts, their values. So in other words, you can say that the patient is moving towards self-realization or self-actualization.
Yeah. Okay, Hassan, what is the false self? And how does it grow?
So the false self, I know we've already talked about that, but just kind of to bring that into focus, it's the idealized self, the one that neurosis is feeding, which has been molded through neurosis and the efforts of the pride system that I guess we'll get into a little bit more, including the neurotic pride, the tyranny of shoulds, the self-hate and self-contempt. All of these together feed. And it's a positive feedback loop, really, which continues to feed and grow the idealized self and continues to degrade and devalue our real self.
Okay.
That last part was neurosis. Neurosis is the positive feedback loop.
Neurosis is the positive feedback loop.
Right, yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Basically, how does it grow? It grows by, it's kind of like sometimes when you argue with the delusion gets stronger, right? And so it's like if someone has a delusion that there's worms moving around their skin in an ER, and you say there's no worms moving around your skin, it's they're going to throw stuff at you. They're going to get angry. No, how many doctors are not listening to me? No one cares. And then I pick up their pants and I look at their leg and I touch it and it's warm and it's cellulitis. And they're a person who's maybe used a little bit of methamphetamines. And so they have this or maybe they're schizophrenia. And so this person in particular just needed antibiotics, right? But when she came in telling the ER doctor with a history of schizophrenia or psychosis or meth, I have worms crawling on my skin, the ER doctor said, call psych, right? So there's this combination of like, we need to listen with empathy, we need to investigate medical stuff, we need to be curious, and we need to maybe not initially just push up against the delusion, right? We're curious about it. We're and then how does the delusion serve them, right? Where's the motivation to keep it that way? And then when you find glimpses of the congruent self, it's like, how do you get excited with that person? How do you decrease the shame that they can actually be congruent, right? Because if one of the things that I think drives people towards this false self is shame. Like, I want to be perceived by you as this person. Sonia, what do you remember? You interviewed with me at a different residency than you ended up, which is kind of fun. Cool.
Yes.
What do you remember of that interview?
What do I remember? I just remember, like, in terms of connecting with you, or in terms of like how I was feeling, or
I don't know if you could say anything here. I guess.
Were you starstruck?
I guess
Tell us the truth.
I was, just thinking about living in a different state at that time where, I had family at, I was thinking about how can I, convey, I guess in a way, like, my worth and like what I can bring to the table in this short, minute amount of time.
Right.
And how can I, just give a genuine portrayal of my capabilities and who I am as a person to this interview in front of me. And I kind of have to figure out who you are too, and kind of how will you react to what I'm saying.
Right.
That is so applicable
How's
about
that
like,
applicable? Go ahead.
well, just like, because when we interview, we often, rather than, sometimes people might totally be themselves and be comfortable with that, but I feel like a lot of people are like, okay, this is how I should act, and this is how I need them to think of me as I interview. Like, I need to act this way. I need to convey this so that I look like this. And I don't know. It doesn't have to be, but I think it's an environment that very much encourages that.
Yeah, and I think linking it to the book, right? Are you more of that expansive type where you have no problem really talking about yourself and your strengths, and right, your actual self and your idealized self are, they're pretty, they're close together, and it's not an issue? Or are you more of that self-effacing type, right, where you're like, all right, I really need to, you look at yourself in the mirror before the interview, you're like, you are smart, like, you deserve this, right? When in reality,
the power pose.
right? Yeah, because you have to convince even yourself, right, that you're worth what you're saying in that interview. And so I think, I don't know, is it something that, Dr. Peter, that you like pick up on when you do these interviews?
Interviews are always like,
He's got all the micro expressions down.
it's like, okay, so the interviewer comes in with this like idea of, this is the stuff that I'm going to talk about, and maybe it's like the 10th interview. And so they have this kind of like narrative that they're going to tell you, or like things that they're, going to tell you. And so what I like to do is I like to just kind of like get at like, what is the real person here across from me, and how do I cut through all of this stuff? Because honestly, if it's something that you've told like 10 people, like your interviewer is probably going to start to yawn. You're almost yawning, Hassan.
It's a script
I, like,
at that
talk
point.
about
No,
the script.
not at all.
The script is like, and that's why
He has a young child.
right, and you're always sleep deprived. Yeah. So it's like, how do you get to like the passion, like what really brought them in? And sometimes they don't even know. And so if I can, I'm trying to get to something that they've never told anyone. And sometimes like the stories are like okay, you are on an interview, and some things like I wouldn't even tell the group. Like, I wouldn't tell them. Like, if they shared something that was like I knew like might hurt their chances at this program, but I connected with them. I liked them. I would rate them high. I would hide those little secrets, but that's who I am, right? I'm not a forensic psychiatrist. Like, I can't like play that game. So like, it's hard for me not to like people. But once in a while, you get someone who comes in and they just don't care. They're there, and you can tell that they don't care. They have no energy for the interview. They don't want to play the game. They don't really want to connect with you. They're just going through the motions. What are you thinking?
He seems surprised.
That's that's surprising. I mean, but
That
then
is
again,
not
also
surprising for me.
I was gonna say, but also maybe not surprising. I don't know.
I don't know. I guess I've interviewed
Like,
enough
why are we wasting
people.
everyone's time?
Right. And then especially when you had to fly for an interview, like now that's like virtual. But I remember like I would do like the tours and like or meet residents or not residents, but applicants at like lunch. And there was always like one or two people that it's very clear they don't want to be there. And I'm wondering why are they there? Maybe just to have like a backup, but you're obviously
You're not gonna have a backup.
yeah, you're not gonna have a
behaving like
backup
that.
if you're not appearing like maybe you have a place you'd rather be, but like if this is not, you have to.
That's bringing up the problem of like the real self may be
Showing through.
like not interested, right? Which is like what do you do with that, right? Yeah.
What do you do?
Yeah.
I mean, that's really where they're thinking that maybe they're better than us. Like, you know, like the mastery point where, you know, the expansive side is coming out where we're beneath them. And then you also have other people who are very, very timid, not talking at all, very, very anxious, not able to connect, not able to think through an answer. And so you have people on the other side as well. And so, but the best people that you connect with are the ones that you feel that there's an actual connection. Sometimes you feel there's like maybe barriers in between or curtains in between.
I think to interview
But you
well,
can tell when
you
when
have to
connect.
know yourself you have to know yourself well. You have to be like your story has to be close enough to reality.
Can't be a script.
It can't be a script, and people will feel if it's like close. Yeah. That being said, like I would read some personal statements and I would be like, okay, this person needs like therapy.
Oh boy.
And this is so close, but I don't see signs that they've actually like done the work. So then it's like, you know, sometimes as if they were a local person, you know, I'd give them that feedback. Or one guy I remember didn't make it his first round, like he didn't get in anywhere. And then he got some treatment and now he's like in the field, you know? So, you know, there is a circuitous route for some people and that's not a problem. Okay. I think we should kind of wrap it up though, because I feel like I want, you want more?
Yeah, I know. I like, you know.
Feels like it's going well.
I like the
We're having a good time.
I like the banter.
Absolutely. It's been fun. Yeah.
We could banter more at our second look. Right. Okay. Okay. But someone who is healthy, I think, is responsible for their own emotions, their own needs. The real self is the original force towards individual growth and fulfillment. So there's this force that they've connected with. It's the original force that's moving them forward towards their growth, towards their fulfillment. They have responsibility that matters. This is from Karen Horney. So they have a recognition about their responsibility, a willingness to bear the consequences of their desires and actions without trying to get by or putting blame on others, a realization that it will be up to him or her to do something about their difficulties without insisting it upon others, fate, or time, right? And they may need to ask for help as well, right? So they're willing to ask for help. And so those are some of the things that I got from the book about like what is health, what is healthy, and responsibility being one of them, right? It's like receiving feedback, accurate feedback, trying to look at the consequences. How do I actually move forward? Being realistic, not blame shifting. So like, you know, you give feedback to someone. It's like, how quickly are they going to blame shift, right?
Well, I think that's a good point that you brought up about accurate feedback, right? Because I think with the difference between the idealized and the actual self, we try to bring them closer, right, to their actual self, recognizing that their needs, their strengths, their desires. But we want to make sure that whoever's telling them that is accurately kind of interpreting all of that for them, because otherwise, you know, they're getting feedback like, "Oh no, you're great, right? You're on a medical rotation, right? And oh, great, nothing, you know, no issues, there's no problems." And you're like, "Well, I guess I am my idealized self in that case, right? If they're not getting any true feedback to bring them back towards their actualized self and help them grow."
Yep. Yeah, really good point. Feedback is hard too, though. I want to say that, like, it is really, really hard. And, it's hard not to look at it and kind of go all bad on things as well. Like, you have to apply some of the cognitive distortions. Am I having a negative mental filter? Am I filtering out all of the positive things I'm not paying attention to, and there's this one little piece of negative thing?
That's why you have to do the sandwich model.
Yeah.
Tied and true.
Except if you're a skilled person like me, like, if once you start hearing the sandwich model happening, you're like, oh shoot, they're giving me some negative feedback here.
He needs a panini model,
I can't.
a hoagie model, something more advanced.
I need like something more advanced.
The ice cream sandwich model.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there's so much here. I think I'll probably, I don't know, I might come back to this book again at some point in the future. So please pick up this old book, but good book. Any final thoughts?
I think I need to read this book now.
There we go.
Good. Yeah, that's awesome. I think you do, because you're interested in psychotherapy. You're interested in the deeper stuff. It's just one small piece of like good things that you should read and sort of absorb. There's a lot, right? So if you want to do psychotherapy, it's like, I think it's a fun book. It's a very colorful book because she's so intelligent. And one of my thoughts when I was reading this is like, I wonder how much her intelligence is like seeing things in people that isn't really there sometimes, Like, go ahead.
I don't know what that means.
Well, it's a fallacy of attributing your personality onto someone else's personality.
Oh.
Right. So just like someone who's more paranoid personality, they may think that everyone's paranoid, right?
Yes.
Someone who's highly intelligent may think that everyone else thinks at their level. And
I see,
reading
I see.
Karen Horney, like, I'm like, okay, she's definitely up there. Like, we're talking about like 3 standard deviations above the mean up there.
A lot of layers.
A lot
to
of
the book.
layers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can just like think about like some passages, and she has so many quotes that are just so well written.
It's just a wealth of knowledge, truly. But then she also talks about, how knowledge isn't enough, and you got to put in the work. And I know that's something that you were talking about with traits of healthy people or people that are putting in the work. And that was really one of my takeaways. You had asked about, any final thoughts. And for me, really, it was like, hey, Hassan, you really got to put in the work. Like, reading all the books or reading all that really won't get you anywhere. And then she also brought up like a tapeworm example. Unless like completely annihilate it, it'll keep on coming back. And so, the one thing I was thinking was that if I don't continue to put in the work and continue to build that awareness,
And what does
finding the
put in the
shoulds.
work mean?
So the awareness. So first of all, like identifying when all these things are happening, like catching my shoulds, catching.
I should catch my
I was about to say, you should catch your shoulds.
I should work harder at catching my
There's so
shoulds.
many.
And if I don't, I'm going to just hate myself.
Like I'm failing at catching all my shoulds.
There's no pressure there. I'm happy when I catch it. But,
Okay.
But
I think
it's not that dire.
I think you need more people in your life that are like, Hassan, like, you're awesome the way you are, dude.
Yeah. I don't hear those people. I ignore that.
We need to
It's
amplify
very
those.
self-effacing of you.
I should only listen to the negative feedback so I can keep growing.
But I definitely think that there's work needs to be put in. You're never, a complete version of yourself, till there's breath, you got to put in the work.
I think the work also is like therapy, supervision, like relationship, right? Like when you get out, you're almost graduating, like put apart some of your budget for continued work. Like realize that that's part of like I still have a supervisor. I still have a therapist. Like I chose my first job, which was a huge pay cut from some of the other jobs I was being offered because I got to hang out with Dr. Tar 4 hours a day or 1 day a week, right? Like that was so much value that I chose that job. So sometimes the work is that, and not that I've arrived. I'm still paying money for, top-notch LA prices, therapy and supervision, right? But, like you can track down people that you respect and that are in your area that you like know have a very good reputation, and you can set up part of your budget for that. So that's what I think of the work as. Like part of it's reading, but reading is probably like 10%, right? Knowledge is 10%. The real work of the work that we're in is either connecting with colleagues to go over cases, but it's also like receiving the kindness and the decreasing of the shame and the looking at your own emotions, your own dreams, what's deeper in there, That's what I can't imagine like doing therapy without being in therapy for years, honestly. Yeah. And so like, I had, anyways, I could go on.
It's like the exercise example, right? How do you
choir.
Preach exercise without doing exercise?
Yeah.
Oh man.
It's like,
Get me started.
it's like, and it's not always easy, right? It's a sacrifice at times. Like it's expensive. Like good people are probably going to be able to charge more, and they're probably going to be able to, be busier so that they're just going to be charging what they can, right? So there's like market price for like different people at different levels. Not that I don't think you need like the world famous like inventor of this particular brand of therapy. You don't need that person. Like ask around to people who are in the know, like, hey, who have you referred clients to in the past like 10 years that you've had a good experience with over and over again? Write down those names and then go to the next psychiatrist you work with and say, hey, who are the therapists that you've referred clients to that you've had a good experience with? Who in the community would you refer your mother or your father if they had issues? You don't need to tell them you're referring yourself. You could just say, I'm trying to get to know some of the names of the people in the community. That's one way of finding a good therapist,
And valuing that, like I think at least when I think of myself and how much therapy can cost, even if it's on the lower end, it's like, so people might be like, oh my God, that's so expensive. How do I pay that all the time? But then I think about it like, if I went to dinner, like this is so much more valuable. You're investing in yourself. I don't know. I guess I think about, because a good therapist needed training, they needed supervision. Like it makes sense that they're charging, a decent amount of money, and the benefit can be huge if you're invested in the therapy as well. So it's worth that, It's worth, maybe you have to go out to eat a few less times.
Right. Like last night I saw a client at like 9 p.m. because it was a crisis, which I never do that, right? And why do I never do that? Because my whole night was like I had a hard time sleeping, right? It was
Boundaries.
I normally have good boundaries. I normally have really good boundaries. But once in a while I break the boundaries, right? Once in a while I do. I would say like that's like a once every quarter type of like, okay, I'm gonna do this. And so like, okay, yeah, it costs that person quite a bit of money for that hour, right? Well, but I lost like psychologically holding that burden, like took away about 2 hours of my sleep, like, took away my time with my family the next day because I needed to sleep and catch up. Maybe took away from this podcast being like fully alive and awake, I don't know. So like, I think like when, like as a therapist, I understand like there's only so many hours a week I can do therapy and do it well too. Like for me, when I go beyond like 30 hours, it's like, it's probably like, I should probably take some time not to do therapy. So I think there's a balance too, where it's like, some therapists are like, I can, especially if they're more neurotically, as in big five neurotically wired, they may be able to do 20 hours a week. They may be awesome therapists, but like, that's like what capacity they have there. So when I do supervision, I talk to different people. Sometimes it's like finding that like how many hours is like where your limit is, and then what is under your margin. You want to live under margin. You don't want to live like right at the edge or above, beyond the edge of your stress level, like you're forced to do in residency. You don't have a choice, right? You have to live beyond your capacity a lot of the time. But when you're graduated and you have freedom,
choices,
right? Choices. And this is interesting because like a lot of new grads don't want to do the 40 hours a week job, Like I hear that over and over again. Yeah, I almost see like grimaces on your face. Like you're like, no, we don't. Because you want margin. You want some freedom in your schedule. You want margin. You want to be able to have the capacity to rest and not be depleted, right? And so, yeah. Okay. Don't think that I should work 60 hours a week for the first 30 years of my life. It's like, I should drive the newest sports car. So I need to work 60 hours a week to drive that newest sports car. It's like, okay, spend the money on therapy, drive the Honda Civic for a couple more years, and work on your shoulds rather than,
But you should read this book.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
For me, I really liked the depth of the book, and it really made me think about deeper themes in life. Like, so for me, my takeaway is to kind of be mindful about, am I getting caught up in the search for glory, like this need for perfection, for like neurotic ambition and the tyranny of the shoulds? Or am I living a life that, like really uplifts my values and kind of is connected to my true self? And it's really interesting because I'm actually reading another book about don't waste your life. It's interesting because Karen Horney is not at all like related to my faith, which is Christianity. But a lot of the themes that I saw kind of are things that I've been reflecting on, which is like, what is the meaning of your life? What are you at the end of your life? What are you hoping to achieve that people will say about you? And like the key theme of that book as well that I'm reading is like, don't live a wasted life. How do you live in a way that, honors your values and makes you really feel connected to your true self on your daily, in your day. So I feel like, there's moments in our lives where like you really kind of find your true purpose because of, at least for me, like a feeling. Like when I went to psychiatry, seeing people at their worst and like connecting with them in a way that they have not with others because they're just so real and they're all that curtain is like lifted. Like that for me is electrifying, because I have this privilege of doing this, of being in this space with you. And then that's kind of how I knew I wanted to be in this field, because that made me feel connected to my true purpose. It made me feel alive. And what a way to kind of live the rest of my days with that, So I think that book was kind of just a reminder for me to keep myself in check and to think about my purpose and my direction.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like the search for meaning, search for purpose, which is uniquely you, right? So it's like, even in a religious organization, you could have someone telling you should be doing this, as in like you should live your life, or like, you should in a way that's maybe it's not core to who you are as a person, right? So it feels separate, it feels different. Like every group of people, every clan has a group of like shoulds that you like to participate. Some of them are good, some of them may not be good, right? Some of them may lead to your thriving, some of them may not be. So it's like hard to sort of parse that out or find what that is. Yeah. Any other wrap-up thoughts? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, this was awesome.
Yeah.
Cool seeing y'all.
I'm glad you guys came. I'm really glad you guys came.
glad we had this.
I don't know what book is next, but this was an awesome one to go through with you guys, and I hope this was helpful. If you have any thoughts, questions, concerns, feel free to jump on psychiatrypodcast.com. We'll probably write up a little summary. I found a medical student to help us with it. Thank you. And so hopefully it's not a shit for them. Hopefully it's not just a check off for their CV, but a passion. But all right, we'll leave it there for today.